Today I'm really thrilled to be here with John Ulm, who is an appropriate person to start with as we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. Because John, you've had incredible experience as a war correspondent, as a journalist, but also more particularly as a Spitfire pilot fighting during World War II. So tell us, how on earth did a boy from Sydney end up flying Spitfires during World War II?
Well, I was a cadet journalist at the old Sydney Sun in Phillip Street, Phillip and Elizabeth, and the Air Force recruiting centre was down in Woolloomooloo. I think it was the BMW showroom, you know, and the war started in '39, and in '41 I went down and said, I want to be a pilot. And the first thing they asked me was, can you ride a horse? And I said, good God, the only horses I've had any connection with rather unsuccessfully are at Randwick. But it's about, you know, balance and what have you. And they said, okay, well, stand on one leg, close your eyes, and hold your arms out, you know, which I did, and I did not fall over. I can't do it now. And then they did the groin thing and what have you, and boom, I was a pilot.
Wow.
And I did, under the Empire Air Training Scheme, Twycommoss in Narromine, off to Canada, and Harvard's, which was out Wirraway in Canada, and then off to England to training. And of course you spend a lot of time doing nothing in the Air Force while you wait for your turn, and then in a training unit in the middle of England, and then up to Northumberland to a Spitfire OTU.
So how long was the training?
Well, I went into the Air Force here, which is at initial training school was at Bradfield Park, where the film school was, you know. When we were at 99, and the Air Force does things in flights, whereas the Army does things in platoons. And of the 30 of us who went in, of course you make, as young, you know, we're all young, you make friends very quickly. And of the 30 of us who went away, 20 of us came back.
Yeah.
But so they're off to Canada on the Ile de France, one of the French transatlantic liners. It absolutely stank, because it was no longer a luxury liner. It was, you know, had
A troop carrier.
wooden bunks from 4,000 or 5,000 people. And we had a couple of hundred Africa Corps prisoners on board, and they wore their sort of groin-length lederhosen, you know, tough-looking guys. The British guards, of course, never took their eyes off them, their guns off them. And across to San Francisco, where the Americans took over, we heard later on that they'd lost some of them. But we went into, you know, of course the Americans had only just come into the war. This would be 41, 42, I guess. Yes, December 41, wasn't it? They came in. Yeah, this would be 42. And we went to a restaurant, and you know, eight or nine Aussies, and we ordered steaks. And of course, the Americans bring salad first, and all the plates, a huge pile of salads. We're just sitting there, you know, and the Americans were sort of looking at us. Anyway, we got through all that, and then up to Vancouver. But the difference in style, we went into a bar, but you couldn't drink standing up. You had to sit down and have some food. Yeah, which of course we did, and then on to Canadian Pacific across to Montreal, Lachine, just outside Montreal, where they gathered. It was an Air Force personnel base, and from there I was down to Aylmer, Ontario, to do service flying on the Harvard, which was the origin of the Wirraway, you know. And then on to I'd been very good at mathematics, silly man. The Atlantic War was on in a big way, and they, although I was to be a single engine pilot, they wanted more coastal command pilots, and I was sent up to Prince Edward Island, you know where that is, and Prince Edward Island was dry. So there's a lot of...
That's got nothing to do with rainfall, I assume.
A lot of traffic took place at the fence during the night, and from there I remember the instructor was Flight Lieutenant Capstick Gale. He was an Englishman RAF, and his big hat was flattened and it was green, you know, with age and spume and what have you. And then down to the Burton, Nova Scotia, to go on to Hudson's, and I wasn't happy with Hudson's at all. And the wing commander sent for me, and he said, you know, you're getting behind. And I said, well, I don't like the aeroplane, I'm very unhappy with it. And the Lockheed Hudson had a delightful design fault. You know the aeroplane, twin engine aeroplane. Now, if you swung it on landing too much, it swung completely and was so designed that the undercarriage equipment went straight up through the gas tank, you know. And I said to the wing commander that, well, if you order me, sir, to continue, but, you know, I'll probably break one and maybe burn a few people, including myself. So he posted me on to fighter command. Now, I didn't realise it didn't hit me until years later, his name was Norman Berry Littlejohn. He was an Australian, but in the RAF, his wing commander. Now, Littlejohn was my father's pilot on his last flight. So he was probably, you know, Norman Berry Littlejohn. Anyway, then on to England on the one of the Queens.
So were you fearful of a U-boat attack crossing the Atlantic?
Pardon?
Were you fearful of a U-boat attack crossing the Atlantic?
No. See the Queens. This we're now getting to. This must be 43. Yes, when I was in Halifax, the things they do in Halifax, freezing, of course. That's where they came in, and half a dozen of us were ordered to go into the hangar, stripped naked, I mean really naked, and be photographed. Now, to this day, I don't know whether that was some sort of anthropological research or some, you know, perverted guy. You just do as you're told. Anyway, I think it was the Queen Mary. And of course, they cruised about 28 and a half knots, you see, and they didn't need an escort. They were controlled, of course, and each one of them was carrying an American division. They were landing an American division, 2 American divisions in England per week, and there were about 1,000 airmen on board. You couldn't even see us. There were two sittings of food, 2 mess sittings each day. You didn't sit, and about eight sittings. So I like to sleep in, and I had mine last. And then you either have a bunk for one night, and then go out on the deck. And I had a bunk, and next to me was an Englishman, his head that way, and with his boots on. And as the ship, you know, weaved and what have you, these boots banging into my face.
Oh no.
Anyway, we got into Guruk and down to Brighton, and New Zealand and Australian Air Force were personnel depot, as the Americans called it. They were based in Brighton with the Grand and the Grand Hotel and the Metropole, I think. You know, the Grand, where Maggie was nearly blown up. So you spend a lot of time, and you move from this to this to this. And anyway, I went up and flew my first Spitfire. Now, the Spitfire Mark 1, the undercarriage was handled manually. So you had your control here, your throttle here, and then a big sort of black phallic shaped lever. And you could just watch the new chums taking off, because as they were doing this to get the undercarriage up, and the airplane Mark II and beyond, you pressed a button and it came a beautiful aeroplane.
So you were sent across to Italy?
Yes, well, I did my Spitfire training, and it was just short of the invasion. And as I've said in things I've written, Montgomery didn't want me to help him get into Normandy, so we were about half a dozen of us. Kiwi, and Aussies, and an Irishman, Paddy, of course. And of course you make friends, very close friendships, very quickly, you know, great. But of course, being eagle-eyed fighter pilots, we were put on the anti-aircraft guns. We had a 20mm cannon, you know, freezing. And it was a high-speed convoy. Now, back in my Sydney Sundays, I'd been in the shipping room, so I knew, you know, the Strathnaver and the Iraqi and all those ships which were well known. And there must have been about 20 of them, I suppose, about 4 columns of 4 or 5 liners, probably cruising at, 20, 22 knots, and, you know, destroyers and light aircraft carrier. And we got down to Gibraltar, and there was a sub-scare there, so we went around in circles or squares around the Atlantic in the middle of the night, and it just amazed me, you know, up come the light, and all the ships are there, and they're all in the same place. So we popped into Algiers, because the Italian campaign was on then, and they put us in tents, just in the dunes just behind the beach. Well, having been in Northern Europe and England, you know, the cold country and the Mediterranean, you know, so we stripped off and into the Med, which was like sort of Balmoral on a medium day. And these 2 great English military policemen, you know, red hats and pipe clay, booting along. Out, it's dangerous, you're too valuable. You can imagine what we said to them. But anyway, from there we were flown across to Naples, and which was the main base. The front was then, I don't know whether they'd taken Rome, but they were, you know,
moving north.
Mind you, Italy, tremendously defensive. But on the point of Spitfires, the Germans, in my view, the German army was the best army of the lot. Fortunately for us, their political leadership was lousy. They would have never started the war anyway. But the Spitfire were ranged. They always retreated, so they were just outside the range of Spitfires. Galland, who was the fighter commander-in-chief in Germany, he said to Hitler, you give me 100 squadrons of Spitfires, and I'll win the war for you, you know.
And so you mentioned swimming off Algiers. I hear that you don't recommend swimming off Pompeii.
Well, no, you read it, have you?
I've heard that story.
Yes, yeah, well, you know, because we were fortunately for us, my whole war, it never really rained. And I was on top, we were billeted on top of a building, lovely warm weather. And I said to the gang, you know, half a dozen of us, let's go down to Pompeii. And you don't say, well, wait for this 8:15 bus, you just hitch a ride. So down we went to Pompeii and into Pompeii. Fascinating, you know, fascinating. You could almost hear the traffic. And the streets had big stepping stones, but they were divided for the chariot wheels. And that's, we went to the interestingly decorated brothel of all the positions and what have you. And on the way back, you've read this. I must have said. Oh, that's right. Ben sent it to you, I think. But I said, "Come on, let's go for a swim." And so we grabbed a rowboat and swam naked, of course. Swam. Here I am in the middle of a sewage out there, and my great pals, they just rowed back and left me to sort of swim back to Mama Italia. The things we did for England.
So you flew in the Italian campaign.
Oh yes. Now, Desert Air Force was the first tactical air force. So, and it was still Desert Air Force, and they were still using Gippo slang. Gippo slang, and there were 5 squadrons on the wing. And my squadron, 145, had the latest Spitfire Mark 8. And it had a couple of very useful advantages. The earlier model Spitfires had a gas gauge like this, and you're never quite sure how much gas you had left. But the Mark 8 had little gas gauge with 2 little clocks, so you almost to the gallon, you knew what you had. It also had a retractable tail wheel, and it had a guaranteed top speed at 20-something thousand, 405 miles an hour. So I rather liked that. And the Air Force told me recently I did 54 sorties. And we mainly ground support, because I said when Kesselring heard that I was coming, he took the Air Force out of Italy, the Luftwaffe. He had some other reasons, of course. And so we never had any enemy air. We thought we were going to get one once. I think it was a Messerschmitt 210. We lost it in the mist. But all of our work was ground support.
Yeah.
So you go. I know the northern Italy like the back of my hand. Bagnacavallo was one interesting occasion. We were going to attack a church because both sides used the church steeples, observation, their guns, you see. And this was a Sunday, and David Carr, the IO, said to us, "Now it's a Sunday, and if any of you have any, religious feelings about it, you can withdraw." Well, we were grinning, So off we went, 6 of us, I think. And the Spitfire had a 500-pound bomb, and we cruised at 9,000 feet, where the light flak couldn't get you. Didn't matter how high you were above that. I mean, I'd been flying at 32,000 feet, and the heavy flak is up. That gets up there. And of course, if you see the red through the explosions, that's too close.
Yeah.
It's easy to get out of it. Of course, you just turn on your back. You lose 2,000 feet in a few seconds. Anyway, I went and I dive bombed unsuccessfully the church town, and swung round and came back into Stratford, and I was strafing it and I got hit. But now, with flak, 40mm flak, I think it's every 5th shell is tracer, and it looks so lazy. There's a tracer, but another 4 in here. But also, let's say the 30,000 German troops in the town with their locals, they're all going like this. So I got hit, and there was muck all over the place. The Merlin is a liquid-cooled engine, so there's a lot of plumbing, Of course, you're sitting on top of petrol. Here's your dashboard, and ahead of it there's a 100-gallon fuel tank, and you're sitting on another 30 gallons. Anyway, it didn't hit the fuel tank, but it hit the air cooling system. And I was pretty low, and we kept the fighter squadrons very close up to the front, so I only had about 5 minutes to get home. And so I rang up our base Gastrol. Our call sign was Dumpling. Dumpling Red 3, I've been hit, I'm coming home, emergency pancake, and all the clocks were working okay. The muck was around, and I landed quite normally, and Stephen Daniel, the squadron commander, who was a mink farmer from Scotland, he was down to meet me, and he said, coming back to the Egyptian slang, Desert Air Force, said, I see you've had a swire dabble. You know the word?
Yes.
Swire dabble.
Yeah. And
that was it. Well, you had a job to do. You were well trained. You wanted to do it, and you did.
And so eventually, you obviously became a prisoner of war.
Oh yes, on that occasion, I actually had been hit about 3 times, made forced landings. Anyway, we'd been, four of us, Bill Taylor, Harry Clifton, who was an Aussie from Bendigo, and Alan Stacey, my number 2. We'd been given the job of going and destroying a locomotive, which is well up towards the top. I don't know where, you know where Venice is, it's about 100 miles north of Venice. So when we got there, about 9,000 feet, we had a look at it. I was number 2 of the flight, and Bill, an Englishman, was leading it. And I said, well, let's go out down and have a look. And we told our number 2s to wait, so we both went down to have a look at it. And they had brought up 5 flat-top rail cars, each with a triple-mounted flat gun. So they had 15 flat guns. I've sometimes thought recently maybe it was just a decoy, because there was no train as such. It was just the loco,
And the flat cars.
Yeah. So, and the flat cars, of course. So we dive bombed it, and I said to Bill, I can't think of his name now, I said, I'll take the flat, you take the loco, and we dropped our 500-pound bombs. We had 2 near misses, and I swung round to go in and strafe the loco, and I can, as we speak, I can see my 20mm cannon. We had 130 rounds in each gun, exploding on the locomotive, and I got a huge thump on at full power. I was probably doing 400 miles an hour or something, and I got hit, and I was only about 50 feet high. And thank God it didn't hit the fuel tank. No, but I couldn't get the throttle off.
Yeah.
So the airplane was at full power, so you get to height. And I headed up, and I knew this is going to, it'll seize up. It was 1,200 horsepower, I think, that Merlin 66. And I got to 9,000 feet, and it cut out. Well, my options were bail out. Now, you had a parachute, and under the parachute was a dinghy. And if you wanted to bail out, we had to get, and also the canopy. The canopy had a toggle. What you did, you pull the toggle, kick the canopy to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And I decided that I could see that I was close to the land, and we were too far up the Adriatic for the sea. We had an ancient seagull back here. You were cruising speed 80 miles an hour or something to come and pick it out of the water. So I decided I would put it, because it was farm country. Not only was it farm country, but at that stage of the war, and I remember the date very well, it's March the 6th, 1945, most of northern Italy, Mussolini was probably hanging by his ankles already. There were a lot of pro-us, friendly forces, you know. So, and I did the most perfect forced landing, in a farm field. You know, what your engine's gone, you stay near the field anyway. I made a perfect forced landing. Now back in Canada, when I did my wings test, I did a lousy wings test with a Harvard. I didn't get into the field when he cut the engine, and his name was Flying Officer Wismac. And I said, I wish Flying Officer Wismac had seen that. But anyway, we had a gyroscopic gun sight, and you know, the Spitfire glider or glue at 165 miles an hour, but you take it in faster than that, because while you've got the speed, you can control it. And I made a perfect forced landing, and I'd you grab the gun sight to protect your face downhills. You remember the ad of the Dunhills with the Rolls Royce outside?
No, I don't remember that ad.
The Dunhill, and just below Piccadilly.
Yeah.
I used, when in my Qantas days, there's a hotel there where I used to stay. It was just across the way from our office. And so off we went, and I was bleeding, not heavily, and I had, of course, a fighter pilot scarf on, blue one. And off the three of us go, the two Germans and me. And what was interesting, they couldn't understand English, we couldn't understand German. But as we were both working in Italy, we could speak dog Italian, you know.
So that's how you communicate.
And I said to them, Mala testa.
Yeah.
Saw ahead and just sat down. One of them stayed with me. Another one went off to find the doctor. They took me to the doctor, and he looked at this, and he drove 3 metal staples into my head, which I had for quite a while, and gave me a glass of brandy full of wood chips. I thought, I'm not going to get a good drink for a while, so I downed that, and off we went. And I then said, Maltesa, and I sat down again. One of them stayed with me, the Huns, and they came back. It must have been a donkey-led dray, you know. So I got into the dray, and Pilot Officer Ulm then gets taken off to captivity.
Yeah.
And I've got it on the map, Campo San Piero, a little town up north of the northern end of the Adriatic, and it was a Wehrmacht unit. The orderly room was only about a third the size of this, and there was a cupboard. I opened the door, in the cupboard there were 2 bunks, so they put me in there, and I could hear the orderly room sergeant shouting to the Luftwaffe. There was a Luftwaffe station at Mestri, about 20 miles away. And what he was saying, look, I've got an airman here. I've got an airman here. He's not my responsibility. You've got to come and get him, you know. So the following day, the Luftwaffe came. And they came in a Volkswagen, the military one. And I had a string of VWs after the war, and the air-cooled engine, whenever I hear that, it takes me back to Campo San Piero. Yeah. And in the vehicle there was a junior officer, there was a soldier with a rifle, and there was a third soldier, and he was the aircraft spotter, and me. And off we went. And as soon as they heard an airplane, they duck under a tree. Now, we used to spend hours looking for people like this. We did find one once. It made it a bit uncomfortable for him. And we arrived in Padua, into a larger orderly room. It's probably a bit bigger than this. And there was a German general there. beautiful uniform, you know. And I was just sitting down, and he came over to me, so I respectfully stood up and just looked comfortably in his eye, and he came as close to me as this, didn't say anything. And but then he went off, and then we went. The next move was on to Verona, which was Luftwaffe headquarters. So we got to Verona, and you know, every now and again, you know, the phrase was, "Well, you know, the war's over for you," and our response was, "It'll be over for all of us soon." This is, you know, the first week of March '45. And down into...
So you had a sense that the war was coming towards its end?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
March 45.
Yeah.
Hitler killed himself in 2 months, March,
Yeah.
April,
May.
May. So, yeah, we weren't, started to be worried about that. But...
and you were taken to Germany? You were taken to Germany?
Yes, but they put me down in the dungeons. Now... The walls were made of very low grade, not much more than papier-mâché. And what I wanted, let's have a sleep, you know. I was quite happy to sleep there for a couple of days. And I heard this scratching. Was this in what you read? I heard this scratching in the wall. So I located it, and I scratched a hole, not gyprock, you know, that sort of stuff. And I looked, and there was an eye. It was the eye of Sigmund E. Hausner from Linden, New Jersey. Now, Eddie and I became great friends.
Through the wall?
Now, yeah, through the wall. But he had been, there wasn't much Luftwaffe in Italy, fortunately for me and us, but they used to do nuisance raids. And Eddie had been flying a Thunderbolt, which had 8.5 machine guns. And at dusk, he snuck up on a Focke-Wulf 190, which was carrying a 1,000-pound bomb. He got up very close, and he blew it out of the sky, blowing up its bomb, which blew him up. So we met through the hole, you know. And after a couple of days, they put us together with 2 South Africans. And if you think in terms of Sydney, you do it all in the dark, you know. We were put in charge of 3 Luftwaffe ground crew. Now, at that stage of the war, you know, that's just about the bottom of the barrel. One of them was an NCO, one of them was an idiot, but they had these beautiful machine pistols, you know, and they never took their eyes off us. So that was the 3 of them, and the 4 of us go down Martin Place to George Street, as it were, and the motor transport was nose to tail with the shielded lights, you know, and that made us drool because all this vast number of trucks. So off we went, piled into, and they held up 7 fingers, and the first vehicle which could take 7, they lowered the back, they're 3 tonners. And we got in, dark of course, and people's knees against us, and heading up through the Brenner, and I felt some sort of scratching and banging going on at my knees, and somebody lit a match. They might have been Italian slave labourers, you know. That's what they looked like, to the extent we could see them. He was delousing himself into his pubics into my lap.
No.
Oh dear, the things we did for England. So anyway, fortunately, I was alive. I wasn't hurt seriously, and to me, particularly as a young journalist, it was very, very interesting.
Yeah. And so, being a Spitfire pilot during the war, I mean, what were your emotions like? I mean, it must have been a combination of adrenaline and fear when you were undertaking sorties?
Not fear. I'm speaking about me. Talking about, yes, anyway, no, if you're afraid, you just don't do it. That's all. It was a job to do, we were trained, the Germans were the same. Except they didn't like Spitfires quite. go down and said, give me some Spitfires, Adolf, and I'll fix it for you. But you had a great sense you were in the best airplane, and we were winning the war anyway. It wasn't, excuse me. But, and so off we went. But we were getting a bit hungry, and we went to Frankfurt, and we could hear the American guns, the American south of France, 6th Army, Patch I think was the general. He was coming up, they were only 30 miles away. And so they were assembling us at Wetzlar, which is sort of an outer suburb of Frankfurt, but on the day we were actually in the daylight in Frankfurt, the sirens went, couldn't hear any airplanes, and instantly the whole city, to the extent that you could see people, they panicked. And our guards took us into the railway station, down underground somewhere, and we were only, 4 of us into a room, and I think they were Polish prisoners. They were down there. So we headed off, we assembled, and I was wearing, under my RAF battle dress, which was very heavy duty, with my Australia flashes on it, of course, and wings, but I was wearing an Australian greasy wool sweater, and the Germans took it from me. I was pretty annoyed about that. It didn't bother them, probably sent it to the Russian front, And I was wearing Canadian Army rubber battle boots, a very silly thing to do, but I got them from the Canadians, and we were then, of course, a lot of the people were in their flying boots, which were useless for walking, and so they had a great pile of virtually new boots, probably American boots. So I changed to a pair of boots that fitted me, and I had them for years and years and years at home, out in the garden and what have you, US Army boots. And they formed us up in 7 columns of 1,000 each, and we headed off to Bavaria. We were probably about, by that time, when I say we, you'd met some more Aussies, 4 or 5 of us. Reg Nevitt was one of them. No, Reg Nevitt wasn't. No, I'm sorry, used the wrong name. Anyway, pals, and we set off. We were about the middle, and we said, well, look, we'll bludge a bit, and we'll get to the back of the column, and then we just wait. But when we got to the back of the back of the column was covered by the SS. They have no sense of humour at all. And we, so we continued the march, if you can call it a march, but they knew the war was over too, and the German NCO looking after, if that's the phrase, our group, he wanted us to pose with him all, being very happy, well, my particular group said, you get so-and-so. We wouldn't pose with them because they wanted pictures to show how happy
the prisoners of war were.
The Allies were with them, And we were nearly strafed by a thunderbolt, but then he recognised that this wasn't a military group, it was 7,000 Allied POWs, so he waggled his wings. I never run so fast in my life. When he came down and looked as though he was going to strafe us. And some of us dashed into a field on one occasion because it was growing things, and we ate these vegetables raw, and they were mangold. And we on the, what was interesting, going through the villages, of course, there were no young men, and all the villages looked so very, very healthy. They were supposed to yield up all their food and pigs and things to the Nazi command, but they looked really, anyway, they looked pretty healthy. So it was very, very interesting. We heard, I think it was Goebbels. See, when Hitler became to power, the Nazis put a public radio in everywhere so they could,
On loudspeaker.
yeah, loudspeaker. And we heard Goebbels' last speech.
Wow.
I didn't understand German, but you know, Siegfried, you know, Volks and all that stuff. Will live again. I think it was Goebbels' last speech. I have a sort of black admiration for Goebbels. At least he stuck. You know, when Goering left Berlin, he had 26 trucks. I think it was 26 trucks of furniture and jewellery
And artworks.
and artworks, you know.
Yeah.
But Goebbels stuck. But when you think of, when you know the story, because his wife was an ardent Nazi as well, where they had their beautiful children, killed their children, and he shot her, and then shot himself. And you've probably seen the photo of his corpse. That is still recognisable. Where they burned his corpse, but his face is still recognisable as Goebbels. But at least he stuck. He stuck there. So it was all oh yes. And so we got down to Moosburg. Now Moosburg is, if you like, in cities, it was sort of like Warunga from the city, you know. It's a huge prisoner of war camp, but we were in the smaller one. Beautiful weather, thank God. And this must have been, the war ended on May the 8th, I think, didn't it? So round about then. And
So you weren't there long before the war ended? You weren't there long before the war ended?
No, correct. And the Sixth Army was approaching, and both sides didn't want to fight over the camp. So the Germans sent out a delegation and talked to the Americans, and under German military law, you had to fight. If you surrendered, you'd be shot by your own people. So in this glorious morning, and I'd met up with the New Zealander, Graham Fries, who was flying on another wing. We became good pals, and we heard the machine gun fire over the camp, both ways, so the Germans could then say, we did fight, we did not surrender, and then the American tanks came through the wire. And I said to Graham, we want to celebrate this, so we got a few twigs and put them in the little road in the camp, and we lit them. And a British Army officer in full walking out dress, golden pips, Sam Brown, he came over and he said, put that out, you're wasting fuel. He'd been in since Dunkirk. Understandably. Well, of course, before very long, others had come along and this huge fire was burning, and the guy I met was Pilot Officer John Jones. Now, that's right, we went out to land shoot, and they put Bomber Command, I think it was an Australian squadron, came over with Lancasters to pick us up from Reims. But on the march, I'd met Pilot Officer John Jones. He was a very old man of about 33, and he was ANSD. He wasn't, no wings, he was an administrative pilot. And he'd finished his tour in India, and he was on his way home, you know, port out, starboard home. And the war broke out when they were in the Bay of Biscay, and the German submarine took all the officers off. And he spent the entire war, as a prisoner. And the Germans took the Western prisoners up the east. And then when the Russians came in, they then started to move them all. And it was from Sargon, which is up on the Baltic in winter. And it was apparently a very dreadful experience. And he had survived all of that. So we piled into this Lancaster, and I can still have a tear over this. The boys up the front took him up to the flight deck to see the White Cliffs come up.
Wow. Wow.
Terrific.
Well, John, that's probably a really apt point to end the conversation. But before we do, one of the things I want to do today was to present you with this special medallion, which has been commissioned by the federal government for all of the World War II veterans to mark the 75th anniversary of the end of the war.
Yeah.
So, on behalf of a very grateful community for everything that you did for us, can I present this medallion to you? And I hope that you treasure it.
Well, thank you, John Ulm. Yes, it is a good thing, you see. We would say this is all bullshit, but it is important that it would be remembered. Yeah.
It is very important.
Yeah,
And
thanks a lot, Trent.
And I see it every year at Anzac Day and at Remembrance Day. The great thing about those ceremonies is just seeing so many young people coming along.
Yeah.
Because the nation is determined to remember what you did.
Yeah,
for us.
I think it's, you know, we talk about our country, our Australia, and people argue about, well, Gallipoli is not the start. Gallipoli was the start of Australia. You know, there's the Federation and so on, which is a piece of paper. But at Gallipoli, we did this together ourselves as Australians.
Yeah.
So, and that's you know, that's where Australians started.
Yeah. So thank you, John, for your time today. And it's been a great honour to meet you and to be able to talk about those experiences which, at the age of 99, there aren't too many other people that you can hear those stories from.
99 not out.
So,
well, the formula is a Scotch and soda before dinner, about 5, and some wine with dinner, and a wonderful, wonderful wife.